Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. This time, we are going to be looking at iRacing. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to dig into. We've got opinions from the iRacing Reddit community, and then a couple articles kind of giving us a broad overview of like the features, the history, and then even some like future development things. So, yeah, what do you think? Is iRacing worth it?
I think it's a question with a really complicated answer, because iRacing is in this really strange spot in the world of sim racing. Like, it's not just a game. It's this platform you subscribe to that really focuses on realism, and it's got a really hardcore competitive scene.
Yeah. And it's been around for a while, right? Like it launched way back in 2008. It started out with a focus on North American racing, but it seems like from everything we've read, it's really expanded to include a lot more international stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely grown into a global platform, especially recently with like a ton of European content getting added. But before we get into any of that, I think it's important to understand like what makes iRacing different from your average racing game.
Yeah. Like the word simulation gets tossed around a lot. What does that really mean when we're talking about iRacing?
So it all comes down to just like an insane level of detail. Like iRacing uses laser scan track, so they
Yeah.
literally capture like every bump and curve and elevation change. It's like they took a perfect 3D snapshot of the real world tracks.
And then they like poured all that data into a physics engine that's designed to be like super realistic, right?
Exactly. You're not just like turning a wheel, you're actually dealing with things like grip levels, weight transfer, aerodynamic downforce. The articles we read really highlighted how much harder iRacing is compared to more arcadey racing games. There was even like this one user who was talking about how they hit a bump at Indianapolis Motor Speedway and almost lost control. Like that's something that could totally happen in a real car.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a steep learning curve there. There's no like hand holding in iRacing.
Oh no, they throw you right into the deep end. There are no driver aids or anything like that. No traction control, no ABS, nothing. It's all about mastering the car and the track through pure skill and practice.
But that seems like that's a huge part of why people love it. Like,
Mhm.
especially in those Reddit threads, people were praising how hardcore it is and the competitive online experience.
For sure. And they really double down on that hardcore aspect with their online multiplayer. They have this really sophisticated system to make sure all the racing is clean and competitive.
They have a system that like matches you with drivers at your skill level, right?
Exactly. They use your I rating, which
Yeah.
is like a number that shows how good you are based on how well you do in races. And then your safety rating, which goes up when you drive clean and down when you cause problems.
So if you're always like crashing into people, your safety rating goes down and you just get matched with other people who can't drive.
Pretty much. But that way, everyone's on a level playing field and the racing is closer and more professional.
And we have to mention that even some professional race car drivers use iRacing to practice.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about it. It's such a realistic sim that even guys like Max Verstappen use it to learn new tracks, and tons of other pros use it to stay sharp during the off season or to like test out different car setups.
So it's like having your own personal virtual testing ground.
Exactly. And for a lot of people in the iRacing community, that realism and the chance to compete against other serious drivers is worth the price.
Which brings us to maybe the most controversial part of iRacing,
Yeah.
the business model. There were a lot of strong opinions about this in those Reddit threads.
Yeah, no way around it. iRacing can get expensive. The subscription itself is pretty reasonable, but then you have to buy all the extra cars and tracks individually. Some people were really upset about it, calling it ludicrously expensive and even absolute greed.
Yeah, there's one user who said, iRacing was good, but it's so ludicrously expensive to pay $12 per car and per circuit when there's dozens of both of these on top of a monthly fee. Absolute greed.
Ouch. That's harsh. But even the people complaining about the price were admitting that the online racing is like in a league of its own. One person said, "It's the only racing game that has good online racing that people take very seriously." In other words, it isn't beat and can't be beat right now as far as online experience.
And someone else said, it's expensive half. I find it worth it myself and have a great time. Oof.
So it seems like a lot of people are willing to pay that premium for a premium
And
experience.
it's not just about the driving itself, it's about being part of this community of people who are really passionate about sim racing.
Definitely. The price kind of acts as a filter. It keeps out the casual players, and you end up with this more dedicated and mature racing environment. It's like joining a club where everyone's serious about realistic racing.
Okay, so we've established that iRacing is a serious sim with a dedicated community. And yeah, it can be expensive. But what about the actual content? What kind of racing can you actually do in iRacing? Is it just like Formula One and NASCAR, or is there more to it?
Oh, there's a ton of variety. iRacing has pretty much every major motorsport you can think of. Open-wheelers, sports cars, touring cars, dirt ovals, rallycross, even trucks. It's like a giant virtual motorsports playground.
So it's not just about going fast, it's about finding your niche and like mastering a specific type of racing.
Exactly. And within each discipline, there's a whole ranking system. You start in the entry-level series and work your way up to the top professional ranks. It's like having a whole racing career in the virtual world.
I could see how that would be really addictive. For a lot of people, it's like more than just a game. It's a whole lifestyle.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the people who make iRacing are always working to make it better. They're adding new content, refining the physics, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible in sim racing.
So speaking of that,
Yeah.
what are some of the recent updates and things that are
One of the biggest things lately has been dynamic weather. Other sims have had that for a while. But iRacing is really known for being meticulous about how they implement things. They didn't just want to add rain, they wanted it to be as realistic and as impactful as possible.
I bet that makes the races a lot more challenging.
It does. All of a sudden, you have to deal with changing track conditions, tire wear visibility. It makes the racing way more unpredictable and strategic.
Hmm.
And surprisingly, it hasn't made people stop racing. iRacing actually has data showing that people are really enjoying the challenge.
So rain or shine, the races go on. What other changes have they made? I know the articles mentioned something about an update to the license system.
Yeah. They recently split the road license into two separate categories, open wheel and sports car. This was a huge deal for the community because before that, a single rating covered both, even though driving those cars is super different.
I can see how that would make things unfair. Like, someone could be amazing in a Formula One car, but terrible in a GT3 car?
Exactly. So now drivers have separate ratings for each category, and they compete against other people with more comparable skills.
It sounds like they're always trying to fine-tune the racing experience. What about new content? Any cool new cars or tracks they've added recently?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They've been steadily adding stuff, including some really hyped cars like the Corvette GT3 and the Ford Mustang GT3. And for tracks, they added the Algarve International Circuit in Portugal and Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli in Italy. They even gave everyone the Navarra track for free, which is nice for new players.
So they're keeping things fresh and giving people a lot to explore. What about the long-term future? What's on the horizon for iRacing?
This is where things get really interesting. They're actually developing their own brand new graphics engine. It's a massive project, but they think it's necessary to achieve their goals for visuals.
Wait, why do they need a whole new engine? Don't they already use a pretty sophisticated one?
They do, but they've basically hit the limits of what they can do with off-the-shelf technology. They want to achieve a level of realism that just isn't possible with their current engine.
So they're basically going all in on creating the best looking and most realistic sim racing experience out there.
Exactly. It's a bold move, but it shows how much they're committed to pushing sim racing forward.
I can't wait to see what they can do with the custom engine. What kind of improvements can we expect?
It's still early, but we can definitely expect a big jump in visual quality. Things like more detailed car models, more immersive environments, and even more realistic lighting and weather effects.
So they're really going all out. What else are they working on?
They've got a bunch of other projects going on, a new damage model that will make crashes way more intense and standardized track limits to make sure everyone's playing fair. And of course, they're always updating track visuals and adding new content to keep things fresh.
It sounds like iRacing has a bright future.
Yeah.
But even with all these positives, there are still some challenges they need to overcome, right?
Yeah. The biggest ones, besides the price, are probably matchmaking and the fact that the community is kind of fragmented across all the different series.
What do you mean by fragmented?
Because iRacing has so many different types of racing, the player base is spread out pretty thin, which means that some races, especially in the less popular disciplines, might not have a lot of drivers.
So even though they have a big community overall, it can sometimes feel kind of empty depending on what you're racing.
Right, and that can be frustrating for people who are looking for consistent competition. iRacing knows this is a problem, and they're trying to find ways to fix it.
Well, it sounds like they've got their work cut out for them. But from everything we've seen so far, iRacing doesn't shy away from challenges. They seem really determined to push the limits of sim racing and create the most realistic and engaging experience possible. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's take a closer look at some of the specifics. I'm really interested to learn more about those different racing disciplines and how the career progression system actually works. We'll get into all that right after this.
All right, so let's actually get behind the wheel and talk about what it feels like to drive in iRacing. Talk about how realistic it is, but what does that actually mean in terms of the driving experience.
Yeah, and the sources all seem to agree that you really need a steering wheel setup to get the most out of it.
Oh, yeah. A steering wheel is like non-negotiable. Trying to control these cars with a keyboard or a gamepad is just not going to work.
Yeah.
You really need the precision and the feedback you get from a force feedback steering wheel to appreciate how nuanced the physics are.
So it's not just about turning left and right. You're actually feeling the car through the wheel, like the grip, the weight transfer, all that.
Exactly. A good force feedback wheel lets you feel all those subtle cues from the car and the track so you can push it to the limit without losing control. It's a completely different level of immersion and control compared to using a keyboard or a controller.
And let's not forget, there are no driver aids in iRacing,
Mm.
no traction control, no stability management, no ABS to save you if you mess up.
You're completely on your own. It's a real test of skill. But that's what makes it so rewarding. When you nail a corner perfectly or make a clean pass, you earned it.
Like, it's a real accomplishment. It's pretty cool that even professional racers use iRacing as a training tool. I read somewhere that Max Verstappen used it to learn Circuit of the Americas before his first race there.
Yeah, a lot of pros use iRacing to practice. They use it to learn new tracks, experiment with car setups, and even just to stay sharp during the off-season. The fact that real-world drivers take it seriously says a lot about how realistic it is.
It's like having a personal racing simulator at home.
Pretty much. And speaking of competition, the online racing is obviously a huge part of the iRacing experience.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Online racing can be kind of a mixed bag in other games. Sometimes it's fun and competitive, but sometimes it's just a demolition derby.
That's true. But iRacing really tries to create a clean and respectful online racing environment. They have a strict sporting code and a really good system for penalizing drivers who drive dangerously or unsportsmanlike.
So it's not just about being fast. You have to be a good sport and respect the other drivers.
Exactly. Your safety rating actually goes down if you're always crashing into people or cutting corners. And if your safety rating gets too low, you'll end up racing against other reckless drivers.
So there are consequences for bad behavior?
Definitely. And that's one of the main reasons why online racing and iRacing is so much cleaner and more competitive than in other sims. The matchmaking system also helps with that.
Right, the matchmaking system takes into account your I rating and your safety rating to find opponents who are at your skill level and who drive similarly to you.
Exactly. The goal is to create races where everyone's on a level playing field and there's a sense of respect among the drivers. Obviously, there will always be accidents, but the system does a pretty good job of minimizing them and creating a more professional atmosphere.
One thing that's interesting about iRacing is that there are no AI drivers. You can only practice by yourself or race against other people online.
That's intentional. The developers believe that racing against other human beings is the only way to truly capture the challenge and unpredictability of real racing.
I guess that makes sense. Humans are definitely a lot more unpredictable than AI.
For sure. When you're racing against another person, you know they have their own thoughts and reactions and strategies. It's a completely different experience from racing against a computer. It adds a whole other level of tension and excitement.
And it forces you to be more adaptable. You can't just rely on knowing how the AI is going to behave.
Exactly. You have to anticipate what your opponents might do, react to their moves, and make split-second decisions. It's a constant challenge, both mentally and physically.
So there's real emphasis on strategy and racecraft in iRacing.
Absolutely. It's not just about being the fastest driver, it's about being the smartest driver.
Mhm.
Knowing when to push, when to hold back, when to make a pass, when to defend your position. It's all part of the challenge.
It sounds like there's a lot more to it than just driving fast.
Oh, yeah. It's a really deep and rewarding game, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Right. We have to acknowledge that iRacing has its downsides. The price is a big one for a lot of people. Even some of the diehard fans in those Reddit threads were complaining about how expensive it is.
Yeah, the price is definitely a barrier to entry for some people. The subscription model is great for supporting continuous development and ensuring a high quality of online racing, but it can get expensive, especially when you factor in the cost of all the extra cars and tracks.
And it's not just the initial cost, it's the ongoing expense of having to buy new content if you want to stay competitive and race in different series.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. You're essentially paying a premium for a premium experience.
Huh.
But I can see why some people would rather just buy a game once and have all the content included.
Another common criticism is that the graphics aren't as good as some of the other racing sims out there.
That's true. iRacing has always prioritized realism and accuracy over flashy graphics, but they are working on a new graphics engine that's supposed to be a big improvement, so they're definitely aware of that and they're trying to address it.
And at the end of the day, iRacing's strengths are its physics and its online racing, not necessarily its graphics.
Exactly. It's more about substance than style.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is customization. The articles mention that you can really fine-tune your car's setup in iRacing.
Oh, yeah, you can tweak pretty much everything. Tire pressure, suspension, geometry, gear ratios, aerodynamic settings, you name it, you can change it.
So you can really dial in the car to suit your driving style and the specific track you're racing on.
Absolutely. Finding the right setup can make a huge difference in your lap times and your overall performance. It's like having your own virtual race engineer helping you squeeze every last bit of speed out of the car.
I imagine it takes a lot of trial and error to find the perfect setup.
It does. But a lot of people actually enjoy that aspect of iRacing. It's like solving a puzzle, experimenting with different settings to see what works best.
And I bet the iRacing community has tons of resources for people who need help with car setups.
Oh yeah, there are tons of forums, guides, videos, all dedicated to iRacing setups, and most of the experienced drivers are really helpful and willing to share their knowledge with newer players.
That's great. It sounds like a really supportive and collaborative community.
It is. That's
Yeah.
one of the things that makes iRacing so special. It's not just a game, it's a community of people who are passionate about sim racing and who want to help each other get better.
So we've talked a lot about the overall iRacing experience, the good, the bad, the community, the commitment to realism. But I'm really interested to hear more about the specific racing disciplines that iRacing offers and how the career progression system works.
Yeah, that's a great topic for our next segment. iRacing has a surprisingly diverse range of racing disciplines, each with its own unique challenges and rewards.
Okay, so let's dive into the actual racing disciplines that you can find in iRacing. We've talked about open-wheel racing, sports cars, NASCAR, but it sounds like there's a whole lot more.
Yeah, iRacing has a ton of variety. You can race on dirt ovals, rallycross courses, you can drive touring cars, trucks. It's not just about asphalt racing.
So many options. You could spend years just exploring all the different disciplines. And speaking of progression, how does the career system work?
So iRacing has this really structured career system that helps you move up through the ranks and make sure you're always racing against people at your skill level. You start out as a rookie, and as you get better and improve your safety rating, you can move up to different license classes. It's kind of like moving up the ladder in real-world racing.
So it's not just about racing for fun. There's also a sense of accomplishment that comes with climbing the ranks and unlocking new challenges.
Right. And within each license class, there are different series you can race in. Each with its own set of cars and tracks, it gives you a clear path to follow as you develop your skills.
So let's say I'm a brand new iRacer, just got my rookie license. What are some of the series I might start out in?
Well, if you like road racing, a
Yeah.
lot of people start with the Mazda MX-5 Cup. It's a really fun car that's pretty easy to drive, and it's great for learning the basics of car control and racecraft.
I've heard that series is always super popular.
Yeah, it's one of the most popular series in iRacing, especially among new drivers. It's a good way to get a feel for the platform and experience some close racing. If you're more into open-wheel racing, the Formula V series is another good starting point.
What's so special about the Formula V?
It's a low-powered, open-cockpit car that really teaches you how to carry momentum and hit your braking points perfectly. It's a good stepping stone to the faster open-wheelers later on.
So you have to learn to walk before you can run?
Exactly. And if you're into NASCAR and oval racing, the Street Stock series is a good place to start.
What can you tell me about the Street Stock series?
It's basically like grassroots NASCAR. The cars are a bit more challenging to handle than the open wheelers or sports cars. You have to learn how to draft, how to run the high line, and how to save your tires. It's a whole different set of skills compared to road racing.
And the racing is probably super close.
Oh yeah, NASCAR in iRacing is known for its tight packs and exciting finishes.
So no matter what kind of racing you're into, iRacing has something for you. And the career system makes sure you're always facing a challenge that's appropriate for your skill level.
Right. And that's part of what makes it so addictive. There's always something to work towards, always a new challenge to conquer.
Well, this has been a really fascinating look at iRacing. We've talked about its realistic physics, its hardcore online racing, its diverse racing disciplines, its career system, its dedicated community.
It's really a one-of-a-kind platform. It offers a super immersive and rewarding sim racing experience.
And while it's not perfect, the price and maybe the graphics could be better. It's clear that the people who make iRacing and the people who play it are really passionate about it.
Yeah, they're always trying to make it the best sim racing experience out there.
And that dedication shows. So if you're listening to this and you're curious about iRacing, I definitely encourage you to check it out. Go to the iRacing website, read some forums, maybe even download the sim and take it for a spin. You might just get hooked.
It's an experience you won't find anywhere else.
And with that, we're going to wrap things up for today. Until next time, keep those wheels turning and those engines roaring.
Happy racing!
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll see you on the next one.